Do you think we can put this crisis, mini crisis, behind us?
I think we can put the crisis behind us. I don't think we can put the issue behind us. So we know that when you get right down to it, what happened was we had a pretty dramatic change in the macroeconomic environment, in particular higher inflation and higher interest rates, that exposed some underlying flaws in business models, or exacerbated flaws that we knew were there, but maybe didn't appreciate how severe they were. And those flaws are still there. There are other imbalances that built up during this long period of very low interest rates that haven't come home to roost in some sort of a crisis. It's incumbent on us to understand what those are, to try to anticipate the changes that can come. But the crisis, I think, has been dealt with by central bank action. I mean, very simply, starting with the Fed, but also in their own way, the Swiss National Bank, in the case of Credit Suisse, put extraordinary liquidity facilities in place to protect depositors. It's giving depositors confidence that their money is safe. It comes at the expense of quite a bit of moral hazard, which is central banks are also very worried about in the medium to long term. So this is the crisis, I think, has been resolved quite well by the central banks or regulators around the world. The underlying issues have not yet worked through.
What do you think would have been well, I guess the answer comes from how the regulators responded, but what do you think is the bigger risk, creating a moral hazard or the potential for financial contagion?
Look, I think when the Fed and the U.S. Treasury took the actions that they took on the back of Silicon Valley Bank and other banks getting into trouble, they had no choice. Obviously, you could debate what the precise nature of the tools that they use to stop the contagion, but they had to stop the contagion. They realized that. They took bold, decisive action over a weekend. It was highly impactful. It's calmed things down. The Swiss obviously were faced with a different situation. They also took quite bold action. Now we'll be debating for generations, I think, whether each of these actions was appropriate, but I don't think they had a choice in the moment. Ideally, you would have put the infrastructure in place ahead of the crisis to make liquidity available to solvent banks, from the central bank against eligible collateral. That's to me, that's a central tenet of central banking. And those facilities weren't as effective as they needed to be before the crisis ever took hold. Once the crisis began, they had no choice, and they did the right thing.
Well, I've spoken to a lot of European policymakers since the events in March, and many of them have said to me that, in fact, European regulators actually have done their job, because if you look at the state of European banks right now, liquidity ratios, solvency ratios, all of those are actually looking pretty healthy. Do regulators deserve to get a high five for the efforts over the last few years?
I mean, I'm not really in the business of giving high fives for people that avoided a disaster. I mean, that's all of our job is to avoid a disaster. But there were clearly some regulatory gaps that were highlighted through this, and I have no doubt that we'll close the specific gaps that have been identified. I think there's a risk that we react and now try to close every gap as if everybody had an equal gap to begin with, and that's not the case. I think we could burden the economy with a tremendous amount of excess regulation in response to this if we're not careful. But I would say that the Bank of England, the European Central Bank, and other regulators around the world seem to me to be very aware of the issues and took appropriate steps. They weren't in the line of fire, so I mean, it's too early to any congratulations, I think.
Hi, I'm Joanna Bersecci, and thank you for watching. You can check out more of our videos by clicking on the boxes on the screen. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more from CNBC International. Thank you for watching.